and it was about co-conspirators, finding early adopters of your ideas early on so that as you're, pitching these goals and plans to people, you're not doing it alone. I am a counseling professor, and so as a counselor, I'm not going to say we all have good boundaries, but we certainly should. We should have good boundaries. It's very important to set boundaries because what you don't want to do is become the person that's wanting to lighten everybody's load, and then everybody is always dumping their work onto you. In addition to looking at the job description for your next move, finding someone who's currently in that position, or even going a step above that and finding who they report to.
I am Alicia Wade, a co-founder of the 5-Minute Career Hack, and I will be speaking to Dr. Angie Cartwright today. Welcome her, audience, round of applause. She is the Assistant Vice Provost for Faculty Success at the University of North Texas. And I just have to add, I have been marveling at her career. Dr. Cartwright has been promoted over 5 times at the University of North Texas, and we're going to learn how. So welcome to the 5-Minute Career Hack.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know I gave the highlight, and it's always easy to say in like 5 seconds some great things, but I want to give you a second to introduce yourself and share some things that you're proud of right now.
Sure. Well, thank you. So, as Alicia shared, I've been at the University of North Texas for a little while, almost 10 years now. During that 10 years, I've been promoted 5 times. I've really enjoyed my time here and getting to know different things about our leaders on campus and our staff and our faculty. It's been absolutely wonderful. So, currently, I'm the Assistant Vice Provost for Faculty Success. In that role, I oversee our faculty mentoring program. So every faculty member that joins the faculty at UNT, they engage and participate in our university-wide mentorship program. So I oversee that program. I also oversee all academic affairs policies. So any policy that impacts our faculty, our students in the classroom, I'm the policy creator, manager, reviser, and that's always fun and interesting because that's faculty grievance, that's promotion processes. So all the things that people enjoy and all the things that people don't necessarily enjoy about their jobs, I get to provide consultation and recommendations on those things. In my faculty side, I'm a researcher. And so my research areas are centered on underrepresented populations and mental health communities. So specifically Black and Latino communities and mental health access to care. That's a little bit about what I do. Over the last year, I was asked to step into an interim leadership role as department chair in one of our departments. So I've really enjoyed that role over the last year. So that's been fun and exciting. So I've kind of been juggling both roles this last year.
Wow. I know there's a lot of people in the audience and that listen that understand about juggling multiple roles, right? Especially when we think about in this economy, but people don't always do it very well, nor do they use it to kind of pivot in their career. So kudos to you for
Thank
doing
you.
that and continuing to do that. So we're going to learn from you today. So today, I thought it would be great for us to talk about upskilling. And that's a term a lot of people don't really understand. Some hear it in regards to like continuing education, or it's usually led by their supervisor or employer. So before we get there on like the success part of it, I'm curious of like when you think about maybe year one at the University of North Texas, what did you envision for yourself? Like you got there on campus, maybe you could share with the audience what your role was and what your goals were.
Sure. So I joined the faculty here at UNT back in 2015, and I really didn't know what to expect. I was shifting from a smaller, more regional institution, and so it was my first, I guess, foray into like a research one institution, and everybody talked about UNT and all the research expectations and standards, and I was like, I just want to do my job. And so I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't have really strong mentors, so to speak. So the first thing I wanted to do was to find someone who'd navigated these waters successfully. So I found a mentor. So I think that was my first priority, getting the job and finding a mentor and trying to keep the job.
So how did you go about finding a mentor? What was important for that person to exhibit? I know you said success in what you were looking to
Mhm.
do, but what were maybe even some soft skills that you saw that they had that made them stand out?
Yeah, building relationships, the ability to just have conversation like we're having now. It seems really simple, but not everyone can do that and do that in a way where it's warm and welcoming and genuine and inviting. And so that was really important to me. It was also important to me to find someone who had some of the same intersecting identities as I did. I wanted to find a woman, preferably a woman of color, even more than that, preferably a Black woman who could help me navigate these waters. So, fortunately for me, I was able to do that. But those were some of the things that I was looking for. I also wanted someone who had some longevity here. So, luckily for me, the mentor I was able to find at the time, she'd been at the institution for 25 years. And so it was really nice to find somebody who had kind of achieved the things that I was hoping to achieve eventually.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love the things you brought forward because a lot of times I will see, I'll just speak for myself that when people are choosing a mentor, they want somebody that's winning, right? And whatever they're trying to do. But I love that you brought forward the longevity, right? So continuing to do that. So, what did you learn from your mentor and how she was able to sustain the things that you thought she did really well?
Well, it was something that I learned from her, and at the time, I was not as appreciative as I think I should have been. But as I matriculated through like my leadership process, I was like, ah, that's what she was doing. That's what she was talking about. And it was about co-conspirators, finding early adopters of your ideas early on so that as you're, pitching these goals and plans to people, you're not doing it alone. So saying, hey, Alicia, I have this idea. Can we meet and talk about it? And then building up your team so that when you pitch it, you already have 15 to 20 people who are like, yeah, this is a wonderful idea. At the time, it seemed like a lot of legwork. I was like, why am I talking to all of these people? I already know, what I want to do and how I want to do it. And so I really didn't appreciate it until now I'm in a position to where if I have an idea, I already know going in, I have tons of support already. So that was the biggest thing.
Awesome. So how did you start applying that? You watch her, you're there at the first year, and then like maybe fast forward us to your first promotion or maybe even stretch assignment that you had.
Sure. So I would say the first promotion that comes to mind for me, she actually positioned me for the promotion. She was actually my hiring manager for that for that promotion. And so
Wow.
that was wonderful. Um, but in that role, one of the biggest tasks that I had to do and that I was tasked with, the reason I was brought in to the office at the time was to create a university-wide training program. And my question was, how am I going to train over 3,000 people? How do I do that? And how do I do that in less than a year? Like, what do I do? And it was a very contentious topic. It was about, at the time, it's contentious now. It was contentious then. It was about diversity, equity, inclusion. So, how do I
Oh my
create
gosh,
this
you better watch
training
out.
program? I know. I don't do that anymore because it is now illegal. But
Mm.
at the time, that's what it was about. And so, it's how do I develop this training program with very few staff members in order to roll this out institution wide? And so, it was finding early adopters, finding people who understood the reasons why we were doing that training at the time and who believed in what we were doing. And so that is actually how I implemented it for the first time university wide. Now, there had been small things in small departments and small divisions, but that was the first time that I'd implemented something that big with over 3,000 people. And so that was challenging, but it worked out well.
Wow. So besides this relationship, was there anything else that you feel like you were able to create for yourself to like be prepared for this promotion?
hmm one of the things, and it's interesting because it's actually a part of my role now, is I didn't really understand early on. I didn't understand all of the policies and procedures. I knew that we had this policy manual and I should be reading them, but I didn't really understand all the nuances. And so once I understood that there was a policy for just about everything, arming myself with that education was really important. So if I had a question, instead of just asking someone the first go around, I would go to the policy. Let me read the policy on this before I ask around and see what people are gonna say. Because if I have a question and I ask three different people, I'm gonna get three different answers. And so I tried to root a lot of what I did. I tried to ground that in the policy.
And what tips would you give others if they were looking for a way to stretch themselves?
I would say if you're looking for a way to stretch yourself, I really would think about I think it's a dual focus. One, in what area are you trying to stretch yourself? And then two, how can you pitch that idea to your supervisor or someone on your team to kind of lighten their load? So, for instance, one of the areas that I used to be weak in was budgeting and building budgets, understanding budgets. And I really wanted to get the finance background for the institution. I knew it was something that my supervisor was not particularly interested in doing. She did not like doing it. And I can't say that I like doing it or not doing it because I really didn't understand it all. So I was able to ask, like, hey, what would it look like for me to join you and pair with you in doing this? Maybe I can take some of this off of your hands. And so it's a win win. I lightened her load quite a bit. And then I also gained a skill that I needed in order to progress to the next level. So those would be the two things that I'd recommend.
Yeah, I love that tip around how do you find something that can lighten someone else's load? What tips would you give people to look out for to be able to do that? Because that's a skill in itself to, to even spot those opportunities. Where would one start?
It is. And I would also say, before we get to where one would start, I would also say it's very important to set boundaries because what you don't want to do is become the person that's wanting to lighten everybody's load and then is always dumping their work onto you. So I would make it really about the skills that you're wanting to gain and to set some parameters on time. I'm willing, I can donate this much time per week to this, or I'd like a project that takes about 3 months long. And then after that, I have something else coming up. So putting some boundaries and parameters on it. But I think the biggest thing is figuring out what your next move might be, looking at that job description and seeing where you have some areas for growth and then filling in those growth areas. So when those opportunities come up, you can say, well, I've done this and this and this. These are skills that I have and that I've developed over this amount of time. So looking at the next job description so that you can make sure that you're a successful candidate for that next job, and also setting boundaries on how much time you have to offer. As you're wanting to lighten someone else's load, you're also not wanting to overwork yourself.
Yeah, that is I actually wrote that down for myself. I have, it's easy to give somebody else that feedback, but to have a live practice of boundaries and setting that, where would you say that you learned that that was important?
Well, by trade, I'm a counselor. So I am a counseling professor. And so, as a counselor, I'm not going to say we all have good boundaries, but we certainly should. We should have good boundaries. We should be able to walk our clients through how to set boundaries. And so, for me, it's just a practice, whether it's my personal life or professional life. I really try to set boundaries. Sometimes people will tell you that I can be very firm on my boundaries. Um,
I
but I think
respect that
there's a
about you. I love
I
it.
think it's, like I don't do things I don't want to do. I used to, but I don't anymore. If it's something that I absolutely do not want to do, I'm going to tell you, oh, that sounds really fun and I hope you have a great time, but I'm not going to be able to do to do that. So I think setting some boundaries and doing that in a way where it works for you, but where you're also able to grow. So to answer your question, being a counselor, I feel like I've developed some skills in setting boundaries in kind ways, in respectful ways, in ways that honor my time. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say I experience you that way as well. You're very kind and clear about what you live and what no, it's very kind. But I think sometimes people, it's hard for them to find a no. And it's this ugly word or standing up for themselves because usually people are rewarded for being flexible and rewarded
Mhm.
for being adaptable. And people aren't always championed and rewarded for being clear on what they can and can't do, especially in the workplace. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I had an executive coach. So when I first moved into my first executive position, my executive coach, she taught me something, and I have caught myself saying this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got so much out of our time together. But I think one of the biggest things, one of my biggest takeaways is a phrase that she taught me. And it was like,
get
yes,
your pens.
get your pens. It was yes, and that's a wonderful idea, but not me. Like, yes, somebody else can do that, but not me. And so it's yes, but not me. So you don't have to necessarily say, oh, yes, that's not a good idea. I'm not going to be the one to do it. It could be a both and. It could be, yes, that's great. That's a wonderful idea. And I would love to see you move in that direction. But let me help you find someone else because I'm not going to be the best person for that. So I'm like, okay. So I say that at least once a week.
I love that. And somebody is being blessed right now that they can add that to their lexicon and in their back pocket and wherever else they need to put on a post-it and have around because I can't tell you how many people we coach on like all these things they're so overwhelmed with. And to your point, it's like you do know both can happen. Like to your
Mhm.
point, like you can be
Mhm.
excited about it and still say, like, now the timing isn't right for me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. So I do want to unpack the other tip that you gave us was around looking for your next move and developing your skills at the same time, which essentially is upskilling. So, can you share an example or like how one will go about practically even being, I don't even say being, but like creating space to have that as a part of their routine? Because I think most people are just like they have an aspiration, but they don't necessarily have practical tips on how to make what they're aspiring to be come to life.
Mhm. I think in addition to looking at the job description for your next move, finding someone who's currently in that position, or even going a step above that and finding who they report to. And, sitting down for coffee or tea or what have you, to have a discussion. I think it's really important to let people know what your interests are. So that way, when opportunities arise, you come to mind for them. The position that I'm currently in, the interim position that I'm in as interim department chair, that came about because I was talking to my direct supervisor's supervisor, and we were talking about long-term goals. And he said, "Well, you probably should at some point be a department chair." And I said, "Yeah, I probably should." And I'll tell you, the job is not appealing to me. It's not something that I wanted to do. It's kind of one of those, it's almost like it's necessary in a lot of ways to move forward. It's like the gateway to leadership in a lot of ways. And for me in my current role, I kind of skipped over the department chair role. So I've been in this role for a year now, but it's not because I was necessarily interested in the job. It's not because I really wanted the job. It's because there were skills that the person in this job developed for my next move, and I know I needed to do that. And so he said, "Well, there's this opportunity. You may not be crazy about it, but we need you in this role. It would meet our needs and it would meet your needs. So how about it?" I'm like, "Okay, that works." And so it is making sure that you're on people's radar, making sure that people, and I say this, and I work in a safe space. Like, it's okay for me to discuss my hopes and my aspirations. Not every place is like that. So sometimes you have to be guarded with what your hopes are. So if you work somewhere where it's a safe place, I don't think there's anything wrong with you sharing what your long-term goals are. And so he knew what my long-term goals were and he was looking out for me. And so I appreciate that. So I think that's part of it, making sure that you're on people's radar and that people, they know that when opportunities come up, oh, Alicia may be interested. Angie, may be interested. Angie wants to do this. So let me tap her about this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's a different mindset. I agree with you first of like the environment has to be right because everybody is not
Hmm.
in this type of environment or is blessed to have mentors and supervisors that are thinking about next and their legacy and backfilling and all the things with succession plan or sharing talent. Right. Some people are very
Right.
stingy and like, no, you're good for me and make my job easy. So want to acknowledge that. I agree with you. But I love to your point of like, let's put that exception to the side and really be clear about what you want versus what people want for you.
Hmm.
And I love that's what I took away from that example of like you being very clear about what you needed to learn, even though it wasn't necessarily in this package, but being clear on like, hey, here's a skill that I need to learn in this season for what I want to do and being able to put that out there. So thank you. Really great pro tip. I'm curious, you shared in the interim role, but I'm curious of what you are currently learning in your full-time role that you have here. Now that you're in this role, what are some things that you're learning in this season?
Yes, yes, yes. And I will say this about the interim role. I initially was not thrilled about it. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be good. I'm going to stretch, I'm going to grow." But I actually like the job.
Mm.
I like it. I'm like, okay, I like this a lot more than I thought I would. I will say it's the largest unit I've ever managed. So I have almost 60 direct reports.
Wow.
And that can be challenging just with annual reviews and 360s and all of that. So that is hard, that is challenging and time consuming, but I like the job a lot more than I thought I was going to. Now to answer your question, what I'm learning in my current role, really, I think I'm learning more about it's more relational and it's more it works out really well because I'm able to leverage my counseling skills, and my counseling skills are really transferable into the leadership role. Sometimes I find myself in rooms with leaders being almost like a counselor, and I'm using my counseling skills by summarizing and reflecting and making sure that everyone is hearing each other. And so that's really that's what I spend a lot of my time doing. But what I'm learning more about myself than anything. It's not necessarily about the job. I'm learning about myself and how I deal with conflict. And, and sometimes I feel like, I might need to write that down for a therapy session later because this is more about me. This is not about them. And so I'm learning about how I feel when I'm challenged in ways that I wasn't expecting, how I'm growing internally. But I think professionally, I'm just learning more about navigating the waters and navigating the relationships with people. People who I think working at a university is very different because everybody in the room has a PhD and everybody in the room thinks they're the best and the smartest in the world. And I'm like, no, that's not, we're not all perfect. And so it's interesting because there are a lot of egos. And I know that that's the case in corporate America as well. But there's some different nuances about working at a university that it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Hmm. Well, I would like to unpack that just for a minute because
Mhm.
I've done an entire series on egos. And I'm sure what is the book? It's escaping me now, the name of the book. The Ego is the Enemy. I'm sure you've read that
Uh-huh,
book.
uh-huh,
Okay,
yes.
love that book. Love that book. So I spent a whole season like really talking about that. Even in our for the 5 minute career hack community, I did like a book review on it. And I share this because I think a lot as people move forward, not saying this is your situation, but I find that's usually the place people are super shocked of the amount of time that they're dealing with that. And not even in conflict or anything like that, but like personally
Yeah,
working through from a strategy, from a follow up and their communication, all these things that they have to put together, really centered around their own ego and the egos of others. So, is there
others.
anything else that you would say that maybe has helped informed how you communicate or even like your strategy of like how you're dealing with these situations that you would offer?
Sometimes I find myself, I try not to ever send the quick reply email because it's never good. It is never good. I think we have our tools. We should use our tools. Do the delayed delivery. Just leave it in your outbox for a little while because there have been so many times where I get an email and I'm like, and I go off and I just put it in the outbox. And then I come back to it and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I wrote that. I'm so glad I didn't send that. So I think that's one important thing. But the other thing is it goes back to what I said earlier, where I said, oh, I've learned a lot about myself and how I need to check myself. I think you really have to know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, be willing to learn yourself because when you do, you'll be able to feel when things come up for you. And you'll be able to check yourself saying, like what's going on there? Why am I feeling this way? Every time this person asks me a question, why do I like lose it? Or why am I snappy? Why do I respond this way to this person and this way to another person? So I think we have to check our own egos and also it's hard working with people who aren't also doing that work. So if you're constantly checking your ego and members of your team or leadership, if they're not doing the same thing, it can be really, really draining and taxing on you. I saw something online and it said pay attention to people who are battery chargers versus battery drainers. And I think that's important in our personal and professional lives. So, professionally, if you're around someone and your battery is always drained, you got to figure out how to work with that. And if you are the battery drainer, you have to figure out how to work with that as well. So, it's important to know how people are perceiving you and how you're perceiving others.
I love that self-awareness piece, which is a daily practice. So I agree. I'm in like a high pressure situation right now. So taking a lot of mental notes of what you're offering, as well for myself. So I know the audience is. And I'm sure somebody had some relief to think like, oh my gosh, this poise. a counselor that's a doctor also sends the fire email and has to keep it in the outbox, they probably feel good about themselves. Like, okay, I'm not that bad because, hey, it is definitely a constraint, right? No matter what field that you're in. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing
Of course, of
this
course.
lesson. Well, thank you so much. You gave us a lot of tips today. Before we wrap, we always wrap up all of our episodes with 5 words or things that are on our guests, what they would offer. But before we go there, I'm doing something different in season 4,
Mhm.
based on external things. And then I also feel so blessed to be able to talk to so many just diverse, talented people. And you never know when you'll be able to do that again. Right. So
Mhm.
I want to check in with you and just ask what's on your heart and mind today that you feel
Oh,
comfortable sharing?
I think for me, it is, I don't know. It's an interesting time where we are nationally. It's interesting. It's a very interesting time to be in education. So I think with all of the policy changes, with the political things that are happening, funding being questioned for institutions of higher education, and um, schools and grants and all of that stuff, the federal funding. So that's kind of what's on my mind, is trying to figure out how can we support our students. I'm always student focused, student driven. How can we support our students with various intersecting identities while still complying with federal mandates? So that's something that's been weighing heavy on most people who are working, in institutions of higher education.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I want us to all take that practice. I've been trying to slow down and hear that because I think we're all dealing with different things. So thank you for sharing and
You're
creating
welcome.
awareness for somebody that's not impacted every day, right? Awesome. Well, Dr. Cartwright, what are 5 words that are, maybe it could be in the season, maybe it's phrases, no rules, right? Usually people ask
Mhm.
me so many rules, but if you were to leave the audience with 5 things today, what would that be?
Okay, so 5 words, and they were all discussed during our time together. So
Mm,
the first four, yes, but not me.
mm,
So yes,
good.
but not me. That's four. And then the fifth one would be therapy. So I have a little sign back there. It says going to therapy. So I would tell everybody they need to go to therapy. So therapy. That would be
That's how
my
they're
fifth
gonna find
one.
their 4 words.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. How can we support you? Is there anything, publications or any organizations or anything that are important to you right now that our audience you can let our audience know about?
Sure. Yes. So one of my recent publications, and I'll share it with you so you can put it in the description and all that. It's about code switching in academia. So it's written by four colleagues. So it's myself and 3 other colleagues. We all identify as Black women, and we talk about code switching in academia, and it's really transferable to code switching in corporate America. So that would likely be a really good read for the audience. And if you don't know what switching is, then you definitely need to read this article because we detail it for you.
Awesome. Yep. I will share that on my LinkedIn as well. So obviously we'll put it in the show notes for the listeners to check it out. And I will, yeah, send me your publication so I can share that today on my LinkedIn because that is
Will
exciting.
do.
I will read it. Awesome. Well, I love you in real life. I have
Likewise, I love you too, sis.
Yep, a lot of respect for you. We go way back, and it's been an honor to do life with you and see you grow and flourish. So I'm excited to share this space and for people to just get a little bit of nugget of all the magic that I won't say magic, the greatness, because it is
Well,
not.
thank you.
It is not magical, right? It's intentional and it's
Mhm.
really good work. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.